discussion. There's been so much discussion around and conversation around our people, our community, our history, our legacy, and its value in 2023. And what I mean by its value, obviously, the legacy, the history, the story of who we are as a people, particularly in America, has been under attack. Mm-hmm. There is a war against wokeness, which is really a war on anti-blackness.
And the truth.
That has, correct, and the truth, right? And that conversation has led to obviously significant pushback in the form of critical race theory on one hand. And we have seen this conversation emanate out of Florida around AP courses with respect to African American history. I think that we take for granted, because we are like-minded individuals, and I think that some of our audience members take for granted that there are Black people who actually believe that somehow this is something that maybe we don't need to discuss. I think that we, when I say we, I'm talking about the three of us on this couch, and a lot of people in the audience who are like-minded assume that everybody gets it. We assume that everybody sort of is on the same page about it. But if you look, it's not necessarily true. There are people who look like you and me who are saying, I don't necessarily need my kid to learn this history. I don't necessarily need my kid to be, their word, indoctrinated in this way, because they believe it stimulates and promotes a system, or a belief or notion of oppression. Like, I don't want my kid learning that they're oppressed. If they don't learn that they're oppressed, then there's no psychological barrier for them. This is their argument. So I wanted us to really unpack that. What are your thoughts there? Do you think that there's any merit to that? Or do you think that it's a balance? Or do you think that these people are just crazy and nuts?
I think that these people don't really understand the fact that if you don't teach it, doesn't mean that they're not gonna freaking experience it in their life.
Right.
Like, is it like some kind of secret? Like, let's stop talking about it.
Right.
And then maybe all of a sudden, all of the experiences they're going to have throughout the course of their life, they're just gonna miss. That's not how it works. The reality is, a lot of these conversations about what's happening have been happening for a very long time, and they're not gonna stop. So information is power. Information to equip you, information to prepare you to deal with those realities. Me having my conversation with my son about how he needs to engage on public transportation, because if he gets pulled over by a cop, that's a real conversation to prepare him for a reality that something can happen to him, even though his father is a policeman.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? And that he needs to understand as a Black male how to interact with the police department when he's encountered. Now, the idea that I don't prepare him with that information is going to absolve him of a reality that this could happen. What? That just doesn't make sense.
I think you highlight a very important point in that part of the disconnect is, for some people, and you hear this a lot, or you've heard this in different pockets from celebrities who live sort of in a bubble, or the perception of a race neutral reality. When you think that your money is long enough to shield them from the effects of that, that's when you sort of are more inclined to say, I don't want my kid learning that my kid is oppressed, so on and so forth, because you believe that for 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, your money is so long that you can protect their reality or shape their reality in a way where that sort of clash that you described never happens.
Yeah, I mean, I almost have nothing to say because G said it all, really. But like I always say, when it comes to Black people in the world, not just America, but in the world, our experiences are going to vary, but our realities are all the same. Right? There are a lot of us who may not, when I say this, people look at me like, what? To this day, I've never had one bad experience with the cops. To God be the glory.
I'm going to cut that up and edit it and put it out and make you sound like... So you're going to sound like Herschel. To
God be the glory. But however, that doesn't mean I don't have the same fears as those who had bad experiences with the cops.
Which is probably more important.
Right. Because I understand the reality of my skin, what it exposes me to as I walk around on my daily life. So that needs to be understood. Everybody's experience is not the same, but our realities as Black folks are the same. The idea that we should not, because you cannot talk about our oppression, and then also talk about the highlights of that we've given this world. Because you got to understand what makes us so magical, what makes everything we've done that amazing is that we've done it in spite of. And we're talking about we're talking about post-transatlantic slave. We were doing amazing things on the continent. We were doing amazing things in South America, here in North America, long before that, right? But the things that we've accomplished, the things that we've contributed to society post transatlantic slave trade, like that's why you can't not talk about oppression. Like we did this while all this was happening. We made all these inventions. We contributed this much. You have to talk about oppression.
Gee, I had a thought that I wanted to sort of engage you on that I think is instructive in this space. Because you are Haitian American, and because this is a conversation that is, generally speaking, occurring about the history of Black people in America, I am always fascinated by the idea that, like, if you're looking at it from an analogous place, one thing that I know about most Haitians that I've met ever is that they are very, very clear and in tune and aware of their history, their nation's history, the spirit of revolution, and how the country got to where it is. I've never once encountered a Haitian person who, understanding that history, didn't instill a sense of pride.
Right.
And so for me, I just, I would love for you to sort of touch on that by way of comparison, because I find it laughable when people say my kid is going to learn that they're oppressed or be indoctrinated into the idea that they're oppressed. I think, to your point, CEO, to bridge those two, it's actually more an example of my kid is going to learn where he comes from in a way that understanding where he is now and that journey should instill a much greater sense of pride, which is why I think it worries people to the extent that it does.
Right. And I think that's the thing. At the end of the day, the question becomes, what's the story?
Yeah, which story are you telling?
What story are you telling? You know what I'm saying? And how does this story play out? At the end of the day, if it's balanced and it's taught in a way that highlights the truth, we don't really have anything to worry about. And neither do they. Because at the end of the day...
Oh, no, they definitely got something to worry about.
But I'm saying, but they need to learn the story about us too. That's the problem.
Why?
Because it's going to help them. And listen, at the end of the day, understand what I'm
agree.
saying. If we keep fighting about what this story is, or the idea, we don't want to talk about the story at all, right?
Right.
That's not where we are, because time is continuing to progress. The reason why the Haitians are proud is because we keep the truth of what took place, and then we keep adding on to it. And that no-nonsense attitude that existed that caused them to revolt at the very beginning is the same no-nonsense attitude that exists today that caused them to get that prime minister out 24 months ago when he was wilding out. You understand what I'm saying? And the narratives are different. He was a Black man, but they got, he had to go. He not for us? Oh, okay.
You gotta go.
Y'all know what we gotta do. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, I'm just saying that the story needs to constantly evolve because it encompasses more and more information. If it's balanced, then it's not gonna leave your kid feeling oppressed.
I think there are two things that you said that are important in this whole conversation. Number one is balance, right? Like it's just not enough to sort of say, yo, you was bought, you was sold, like good, to quote Goody Mob.
Right.
And and that's what you was told. Like there is, and the whole notion of, and again, part of it is, to your point about the number of things that we were doing and the number of places we were doing them in, when it's framed in a model that's like up from slavery, and that's the beginning and the context for everything that follows afterwards, then it does become problematic.
Right.
The other thing that I'll say, so balance is key. The other thing that I'll say that I always find interesting about this discussion is there is an unwillingness to place current day events in the appropriate context. And I think that's something that, like I've talked to Hillary about this before. For example, I think one of the reasons why some of us are hesitant to do that is because we hold together our lives based on stories we tell ourselves. Mm-hmm. So for many of us, we need certain things, certain realities about race to be true or not true just to keep our heads level. Because if we think about, wait a minute, so y'all did this back then and we're still facing oppression now, For some people, that's crazy making. Like they really don't know how to keep it together. So this conversation for some people, actually, when you think about it, it's difficult for them to embrace because when you understand what currently still is taking place, how couldn't you be a little angry?
Right.
How couldn't you have a certain amount of rage? And some people, they can't operate in that space, so they reject it altogether.
Kind of what you just said made me think of Baldwin. To be Black and American, relatively, conscious means that you're in a constant state of rage, right? But I wanted to kind of touch on what G was saying. I think it's very important that those who are on the oppressor side know the story. It's because you can't ask somebody to change something that they don't acknowledge is already existing.
Right.
So you need to know, like this, whether they accept it or not, that's a whole nother conversation. But we can't be like,
But at this
we don't
point,
need to talk.
though, bro,
But at some
they
point,
got the same books, the same Google, the same.
I get
like
it.
if they don't know now,
But I get it. But the truth of the matter is, we can't give up. We can't give up for us because they still have all of the power. Even though we are the global majority, when you talk about the United States of America, they have the power. So it's not like we can be like, all right, let's stop talking about it. Let's band together. Let's get solidarity. They're not gonna let that happen. So we gotta you have to.
for us, we got to learn it.
And you gotta change people's minds. That's the only way you get to that point. And the truth of the matter is, if I'm 100% honest, you always ask, do I believe in the Negro? Yes. Will there be a revolution? No, because nobody's ready to die.